The stale pretzel I'd saved felt like a rock in the pocket of my threadbare coat. It was our last resort, a final shield against the gnawing hunger that had become our constant companion under the Brooklyn Bridge. But I had a better plan, a much more dangerous one. The wind that whipped under the Brooklyn Bridge was a physical thing, a predator with icy teeth that bit through our thin jackets. My brother Leo, all of 5 years old, shivered beside me, his face smudged with dirt, trying to tuck my smaller 3-year-old body closer to his for warmth. On my other side, 4-year-old Chloe sat silently, her gaze fixed on a crack in the pavement as if it held all the world's secrets. These were my siblings, and according to the dog-eared pages of a story I now lived in, they were doomed. Leo, who always saved the biggest piece of any scrap we found for me, was destined to become the story's primary villain, a man whose name would one day be whispered in fear across all 5 boroughs. Chloe, who tried so earnestly to brush my hair with her fingers, would become the despised supporting character, her heart twisted by jealousy and loss. And the catalyst for their fall? Me, Thea, their little sister whose death from pneumonia in this very spot was the first domino to fall. "Thea, you're warm," Leo mumbled, his voice a puff of white in the frigid air. He pulled a stale, hard pretzel from the pocket of his own worn-out jacket. It was a treasure he'd found in a trash can near a food cart. With painstaking care, he broke it into 3 pieces, pushing the largest one into my hand. A hopeful, grimy smile spread across his face. I looked at the pathetic offering, then at Chloe, who was now poking a dead leaf with a twig. My heart clenched. I couldn't let it happen. I couldn't let this city swallow them whole. "We're going to meet the philanthropist," I declared, my voice small but firm. It was a desperate plan I'd been hatching for 3 days, ever since our father's new girlfriend had thrown our mother out onto the street. I grabbed their hands. "It's time." We scurried from our shelter, 3 tiny figures against the massive, indifferent city. My eyes were locked at the intersection a block away. For the past 2 days, I had observed. Every Wednesday, at precisely 3 p.m., a black Rolls-Royce Phantom with the vanity plate CROFT-1 would pass this way. The crosswalk light turned red. Taking a deep breath that tasted of exhaust fumes and cold dread, I gave the signal. The 3 of us tumbled onto the white stripes of the crosswalk, a carefully arranged pile of pathetic, shivering children. Through my slitted eyelids, I saw the behemoth of a car glide to a silent, perfect stop just inches from my head. My heart hammered with a grim triumph. It worked. But then a series of glowing, translucent letters flickered to life before my eyes, visible only to me. Web novel comment. "No, you idiots! That's not some kind-hearted philanthropist. That's Julian, the Reaper Croft." "Oh, this is bad. The plot is derailing. Weren't they supposed to just freeze to death? Julian just closed a hostile takeover. He's in a terrible mood." The comments, the Damaku from the world I'd left behind, flashed in my vision. My blood ran cold. A Tafat, the original text had called him, an evil Buddha, a man who looked serene but utterly ruthless. I hadn't just picked a rich man, I'd picked a king cobra. My body went rigid. The tinted passenger window slid down with an expensive, near-silent hum. A face that could have been carved from marble, perfect, severe features and eyes as cold and empty as a winter sky. His long, elegant fingers were idly rolling a string of smooth, obsidian beads. The Damako exploded. "Laugh out loud, a 5-year-old villain, a 4-year-old side villain, and a 3-year-old plot device. Total age 12. They think this guy runs a soup kitchen? He eats souls for breakfast." Julian Croft's gaze swept over us, devoid of any emotion. Pity? Annoyance? There was nothing. His thin lips parted slightly. "Drive through them." The words were spoken softly, a calm, simple instruction. The engine gave a low growl. My survival instinct screamed. In a flash, I scrambled up, yanking Leo and Chloe back toward the curb just as the car began to inch forward. The driver, a man with a grim face, lowered his own window. He stared at our 3 grimy faces for a beat, then turned to speak quietly to the back seat. "Mr. Croft, sir, they look like Marcus Croft's children, the ones he threw out last week." My heart stopped. Marcus Croft, the name of our worthless gambling father in the novel. My memories, hazy from the transmigration, suddenly sharpened. My mother, Eleanor Shen, had been part of an arranged business marriage with Marcus. He'd bled her family's trust fund dry before casting her and her children aside. And Julian Croft, The novel mentioned him only briefly as the true, almost mythical head of the Croft Empire, a man who lived in seclusion, untouchable as a god. A new wave of Damaku flooded my vision. Wait, I remember a footnote. Julian once dropped his obsidian beads at a gala, and it was Thea's mom, Eleanor Shen, who found them and had them returned. He owed her a favor. The poor woman never knew. She never got to use it to save herself. My head snapped up. My eyes met Julian's bottomless, dark gaze. His fingers were still on those obsidian beads. He suddenly spoke, his voice cutting through the city noise. Your mother. Her name was Eleanor Shen. It wasn't a question. My heart hammered against my ribs. I gave a single, jerky nod. His eyes narrowed. The slow, rhythmic movement of his fingers on the beads stopped. In the original story, I died here. My father, my uncle, Marcus, would have walked past my frozen body without a second glance. But now, a new memory surfaced, a whispered conversation I'd overheard. My mother's pregnancy timeline didn't quite line up with Marcus's schedule. And on the night of the old Mr. Croft's birthday gala, the night my mother supposedly left early, feeling ill, Julian Croft had reportedly lost his signature obsidian beads. I stared at the beads in his hand. A wild, insane, desperate idea exploded in my mind. It's a long shot, but it's the only shot we have. The cold was nothing compared to the fire in my veins. I tightened my grip on my siblings' hands, pulled them forward, and dropped to my knees with a soft thud on the pavement. Lifting my chin, I looked directly at the most feared man in New York City, and in the clearest voice I could manage, said, Dad? Beside me, out of pure panicked imitation, Leo and Chloe echoed the word, Dad? The sound of 3 small voices, clear and questioning, hung in the air. The obsidian beads in Julian Croft's hand stilled completely. The entire world seemed to hold its breath. An unnatural silence descended upon the chaotic street corner, broken only by the distant wail of a siren. Julian Croft slowly crouched, bringing his piercing gaze down to my level. The air grew so cold I could feel it in my bones. His voice was a low murmur, laced with something that was not kindness, but a chilling curiosity. Do you know the price for lying to me, little one? I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat feeling as large as a fist. This was it. The entire gamble rested on this moment. I leaned in, as if sharing a secret, and whispered the date I had seen scrawled in my mother's old diary, a date that meant nothing to anyone but her. My birthday. Mom always said my birthday was November 26th. For the first time, a flicker of genuine shock crossed Julian Croft's sculpted features. His pupils contracted sharply. The mask of icy indifference cracked just for a second. He stood up abruptly, his tall frame blocking out the streetlights. His voice was sharp, clinical, cutting through the air. Get in the car. He glanced at my siblings, who were huddled behind me. A brief, almost imperceptible pause. All of them. The ride to his penthouse was a silent, surreal journey. We were lifted from the grimy, familiar streets into a world of polished chrome and plush leather. The Rolls-Royce moved so smoothly, it felt like we were floating. Leo and Chloe pressed against me, their eyes wide with a mixture of terror and awe. The elevator that took us to the top floor didn't make a sound. It opened directly into a vast living space that was less a home and more a work of art. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a breathtaking panorama of New York City's glittering skyline. The furniture was sparse, modern, and looked impossibly expensive. A stern-looking man in a perfectly tailored suit, who I guessed was the butler, met us at the door, his face a mask of professional calm that couldn't quite hide his shock. Mr. Croft, this is unexpected. Harrison, Julian said, his tone leaving no room for questions. Get Dr. Evans over here now and arrange for some food. They look... He trailed off. his eyes scanning our small, dirty forms with a detached, analytical gaze. Malnourished. Less than an hour later, a kind-faced doctor was attempting to approach me with a cotton swab. Leo immediately transformed into a tiny wolf, launching himself forward and baring his teeth. "Don't touch her!" he snarled, his small body tense with fury. Julian's brow furrowed in annoyance. The butler, Harrison, moved swiftly, gently but firmly holding Leo back. "The doctor just needs a single strand of hair, young man. It won't hurt your sister." "It's okay, Leo," I said softly, patting his arm. "Getting a hair plucked doesn't hurt." Reassured, he allowed the doctor to quickly and painlessly take a sample from each of us before rushing off, promising expedited results within 3 hours. Then came the food. A cart was wheeled in, laden with dishes that made my stomach ache with a fierce, desperate longing. There was roasted chicken, creamy mashed potatoes, tiny steamed vegetables, and soft bread rolls that were still warm. Forgetting all caution, we descended upon the food like a pack of starving animals. I barely had time to swallow one bite before stuffing another in my mouth. Leo, even in his frenzy, tore pieces of tender chicken and placed them on my plate. Chloe, with rice still stuck to her own cheek, carefully took a napkin and dabbed at a smear of gravy on my chin. Julian Croft sat in a large armchair across the room, watching us. He didn't eat. He simply observed, his face unreadable, his fingers once again moving slowly over his new string of obsidian beads. The air was thick with tension. Web novel comment. "This is so stressful to watch. What is he thinking? Is he looking at Thea? His gaze is so intense."
Just as I was trying to decide if I could fit a whole bread roll into my pocket, Harrison entered the room, his footsteps quick and silent. He held a sealed manila envelope. My heart leaped into my throat. This was it. I immediately began stuffing food into my pockets. A chicken leg, a handful of baby carrots, anything I could grab. "What are you doing?" Leo whispered, his mouth full. "Packing," I mumbled back. "In case he kicks us out again, we can't be hungry." A strange sound cut through the room. It took me a moment to realize it was Julian Croft, chuckling. It was a dry, humorless sound. He took the envelope from Harrison, tore it open, and scanned the single sheet of paper inside. His expression didn't change, but a profound stillness settled over him. He tossed the paper onto the low table in front of us. The letters were stark and black against the white page. DNA analysis result, Thea Shen. Relationship to Julian Croft, biological father. Probability, 99.999%. I tilted my head, blinking my big, innocent eyes, pretending I couldn't read the words that sealed our fate. I actually hit the jackpot. My lord," Harrison stammered. A silver fork he was holding slipped from his grasp and clattered onto the marble floor. He stared at me, his eyes wide, and then back at Julian. "The eyes, the bridge of her nose. She looks exactly like you did as a child, sir." "You didn't seem to think so an hour ago, buddy," I thought wryly. Julian's gaze flickered to me. He said, "From now on, you will stay here," his voice flat and final. I seized the moment, scrambling over to my siblings and grabbing their hands, holding on tight. "With my brother and sister," I declared, looking him straight in the eye. Leo and Chloe immediately flanked me, two tiny soldiers ready for battle, their small shoulders squared as they glared at the powerful man who was now, impossibly, my father. Julian Croft looked at the three of us, a united, defiant front. He was silent for a long moment. Then, with a curt nod, he spoke. "Fine. They stayed too." He turned and walked away without another word, the faint click of his obsidian beads the only sound he left in his wake. Mr. Harrison, bless his professional heart, snapped back into action. With the efficiency of a military commander, he had the staff prepare rooms. I was led to a bedroom that looked like it had been ripped from a fairy tale. It was an explosion of pink and white, with a canopied bed so large I felt like a doll in a dollhouse. Leo and Chloe were given their own impressive rooms on either side of mine. But trauma clings to you like a shadow. The next morning, when I padded out of my room, I almost tripped. Curled up on the plush carpet right outside my door were Leo and Chloe. They had slept there all night, like two little guard dogs. Leo's hand was wrapped tightly around a heavy silver dinner fork he'd apparently smuggled from the dining room. They had been protecting me from the ghosts of our past, even in this palace in the sky. My throat tightened. "Hey," I whispered, gently shaking them. "You should sleep in your beds. They're warm." Chloe's eyes fluttered open. She wrapped her arms around my legs immediately. "No, have to protect Thea." As they sat up, groggy and disheveled, Mr. Harrison approached with a tray of juice. "Good morning, little ones. Did you sleep well?" Then he stopped, his eyes fixing on something. He knelt down, his gaze locked on the back of my ear. "Good heavens, child, what is this?" He was staring at the scar. It was a small, pale, puckered circle of skin, a burn mark left by my Uncle Marcus's new girlfriend a year ago, a punishment for crying too loudly. I reflexively pulled away. His voice was soft with horror. "Who did this to you?" I bit my lip. My other father," I mumbled, lowering my gaze to the floor. "He said I was bad." It was the stepmother with the cigarette, that monster, and Marcus just watched. Mr. Harrison's hand trembled, wanting to touch the scar but not daring to. His face was a mixture of pity and rage. That man is not your father. He is your uncle. Mr. Croft is your father." "What about them?" I asked, my voice feigning childish innocence as I pointed to my siblings. "Is he their dad too?" Harrison opened his mouth to explain, but a sharp sound from behind us made him freeze. Clack. One of the obsidian beads from Julian's prayer string had fallen to the floor. He was standing there, silent as a wraith, his face an unreadable mask, but his eyes were locked on the scar behind my ear. A terrifying glacial coldness radiated from him. He bent down, picked up the bead, and his voice was deceptively calm. "Harrison, isn't Marcus bidding on that large parcel of land south of the city?" The butler stiffened. "Yes, Mr. Croft. The final permits are due this week." Julian's gaze was still fixed on me, but his words were for Harrison. "Call the city planning department. Tell them an anonymous tip suggests an endangered species of butterfly has been found nesting on that property. They'll need to initiate an environmental review. Immediately." Marcus was bidding on the large parcel of land south of the city. The final permits are due this week. Julian's gaze was still fixed on me, but his words were for Harrison. "Call the city planning department. Tell them an anonymous tip suggests an endangered species of butterfly has been found nesting on that property. They'll need to initiate an environmental review. Immediately." The next morning at breakfast, the mood was bizarrely domestic. Chloe, in an act of sisterly love, had gathered my hair and tied it with a rubber band she'd found. The result was a single, lopsided tuft sticking straight up from the top of my head like a confused antenna. Julian stared at it from across the table, his coffee cup paused halfway to his lips. "What is that?" "Chloe did it," I said proudly. "It's unacceptable," he stated flatly. "Fix it." Harrison rushed to call for a female staff member, only to remember with a flush of embarrassment that the entire household staff, from the butlers to the security detail, was male. The room fell silent. I hopped off my chair, my hair antenna bobbing ridiculously, and ran over to Julian. I tugged on the sleeve of his expensive suit. "You do it, Daddy." The air froze. Harrison looked like he was about to have a stroke. The security guards standing by the walls looked at each other in panic. Julian's long, elegant fingers, which I only had seen hold beads or sign documents, froze in midair. Just as I thought he was going to refuse, he let out a quiet, resigned sigh. He reached out and awkwardly removed the rubber band.
10 minutes later, I was the proud owner of a hairstyle even more chaotic than the first. He had created 2 pigtails. The one on the left was a tangled mess, like a bird's nest. The one on the right stuck straight out, stiff and angled towards the ceiling. I looked like a poodle that had been struck by lightning. A spray of milk shot from Leo's mouth. Chloe was biting her lips so hard to keep from laughing that her whole body was shaking. Mr. Croft, Harrison stammered. Perhaps I could... A single, sharp glare from Julian silenced him. Julian stared at his handiwork, his brow furrowed in concentration. Then, with a decisive motion, he reached out and patted down the tangled left pigtail until it was flat against my head. Symmetrical. He pulled his hand back, looking satisfied, as if he had just solved a complex corporate problem. I looked at my reflection in a polished silver serving dish. He had turned me into a walking disaster. It's beautiful, I lied without blinking, giving him a huge thumbs up. You're the best at tying hair, Daddy. A strange thing happened. The tips of Julian's ears turned a faint shade of red. The day Julian announced we were starting kindergarten, the penthouse turned into a war zone. It wasn't excitement that filled the air. It was pure, primal terror. You're selling her, Leo shrieked, launching himself at me and wrapping his arms around my legs like a tiny python. He looked up at Julian, his face pale with panic. You can't. She doesn't eat much and she knows how to play dead. She's useful, I promise. Chloe, her face ashen, took a more drastic approach. She pulled a sharp, jagged piece of a broken mirror from her pocket, something she must have scavenged and kept hidden from our days on the street. She held the sharp edge to her own palm, her small hand trembling violently. If you try to separate us, she whispered, her voice cracking, I'll die right here.
Crack. The sound was sharp and loud. The string of obsidian beads in Julian's hand had snapped. Dark, polished beads scattered across the marble floor, rolling into the shadows. He didn't seem to notice. He slowly crouched down, looking directly into the eyes of the 2 hysterical children. Who, he asked, his voice dangerously low, told you I was selling her? He did, Leo blurted out, tears finally streaming down his dirty cheeks. Our other dad. He said he was taking us for ice cream, but he tried to sell Thea to that awful boy from the Astor family, to be his toy. The air in the room dropped 10 degrees. I froze, the half-eaten lollipop I was enjoying suddenly tasting like ash. The memory flooded back, vivid and horrifying. Being locked in a sterile white room by Marcus. The Astor boy, a spoiled child with cruel eyes, advancing on me, grinning. Let's play a game, he'd said, reaching for the buttons on my coat. It's called Push the Birdie from the Nest. He had tried to drag me onto the second-floor balcony. I had responded by sinking my teeth into his wrist and, with all my might, shoving him backward into a large, decorative fountain. He said I was too violent, I whispered, the memory making me shiver. So they sent me back. A deep, guttural sound of fury rumbled in Julian's chest. He stood up so fast he seemed to uncoil. His fist, clenched into a white-knuckled knot, slammed down on the antique mahogany coffee table beside him. The rare, priceless wood split with a deafening crack. Mr. Croft, Harrison began, rushing forward. As if on cue, the penthouse elevator doors slid open, and Marcus Croft himself stormed in, his suit immaculate but his face slick with sweat. He was frantic. Julian, you have to help me. The Parks Department just put a hold on the Southampton property. Something about an endangered moth. It's going to cost me millions.
His tirade stopped short when he saw us. He saw me, sitting on an ottoman, my disastrous pigtail still intact, his face twisted in disgust. "What is that piece of trash doing here? Get her out. She's bad luck." "She," he said, his voice as soft and sharp as splintered ice, "is my daughter." Marcus froze, then let out a bark of laughter. "Your daughter? Did father make you go to another one of those charity auctions? If you wanted to adopt Julian, you could have at least picked one without a track record. That thing is the bastard child of Eleanor and God knows who." "You're wrong," Leo and Chloe shouted in unison, rushing to stand in front of me. "Bia is not a bastard." "What do you brats know? Your mother, at that gala." Crack. It was a different sound this time, not wood. It was the sickening, wet sound of bone meeting bone. Julian's punch had been a blur of motion, a single, precise, brutal strike that sent Marcus flying backward into a wall. He slid to the floor, dazed, a spray of blood erupting from his nose. Guards immediately swarmed forward, restraining Marcus as he groaned. Julian calmly flexed his hand, his knuckles now red. He looked at the guards, his voice utterly devoid of emotion. His teeth seemed to be misaligned. "Take him to a doctor. Have them straightened." As Marcus was dragged away, screaming obscenities and threats, a terrified silence fell over the room. Leo and Chloe stared, wide-eyed, at the spot where their former guardian had been. Chloe timidly tugged on Julian's trousers. "Uncle, will you hit Thea like that?" Julian looked at her, and for a moment, his harsh expression softened with something unreadable. "No," he said, his voice hoarse. "Never." "Then hit me instead," Leo declared, stepping forward with tear-streaked eyes. "Don't hit her, I can take it." Web novel comment. "My heart, my poor baby villain, he's trying to protect her. I'm crying." Julian stared at them, and I could see the war behind his eyes. He suddenly reached out. We all flinched, but he simply plucked the half-eaten lollipop from my mouth. "You've had 10 of these today. Any more and your teeth will rot." He turned to a stunned Harrison. "Cancel the demolition of Marcus's downtown office building." Harrison blinked. "Sir?" "We are not building a new trading floor there anymore. Build a theme park instead." I stared at the man who was supposedly a legendary monster, the man who had just ordered his brother's ruin and was now, in his own strange, terrifying way, trying to build a world for us. Perhaps, I thought, I hadn't latched on to a shark, after all. I'd latched on to a dragon. 4 years passed in a blur of bizarre high-stakes domesticity. My life, once a desperate struggle for stale pretzels, was now a whirlwind of private tutors, tailored dresses, and the constant unnerving presence of my dragon-like father. I thought I was saving my siblings from becoming villains. I hadn't realized Julian's plan wasn't to reform them, but to forge them into something far more formidable. On any given afternoon, I would peek into the East Wing library to see Leo, now a sharp-eyed 9-year-old, sitting across from Julian. Spread between them were the consolidated quarterly reports for Croft Industries. Leo's face would be tense with concentration, a child-sized fountain pen clutched in his hand as he pointed out discrepancies in the logistics division's spending. Down the hall, Chloe, at 8, would be standing in front of a whiteboard covered in complex equations, calmly debating topology with 3 bewildered-looking mathematics professors from Columbia University. Web novel comment. Is this child abuse or genius incubation? I can't tell. Web novel comment. Forget villains, he's training the next generation of the Illuminati. I would watch from the doorway, my stomach twisting in knots. This wasn't fixing their dark destiny. This was upgrading it with military-grade hardware.
Thea. Julian's voice would cut through my thoughts. He'd find me hiding and produce a small, elegant abacus. We still haven't mastered this 7 times table. Your focus is lacking. My intellect, which had seemed so prodigious in a normal kindergarten, was like a single brick next to the skyscrapers of my siblings' brains. While they were planning corporate takeovers and exploring non-Euclidean geometry, I was struggling to remember what 7 times 8 was. Julian would sigh, pat my head, and tell me, "It's fine. Your primary responsibility is to eat well." I wasn't sure if it was a comfort or an insult. On my 7th birthday, we encountered the novel's original female lead. Her name was Lily Tran. We saw her cornered in a grimy alley by 3 older, bigger boys. She was rail-thinned and looked like a strong gust of wind could snap her in two, but her eyes blazed with a stubborn fire. She fought back, ramming her head into one boy's stomach with a ferocity that was painfully familiar. It was the same desperate, cornered animal energy I'd used against the Astor boy in the fountain. From the back of the Rolls-Royce, Leo and Chloe watched with cold, analytical eyes. "Should we help her?" I asked, testing the waters. Leo scoffed. "Amateur. She should have grabbed a brick and aimed for the temple. Much more efficient." "Or a broken bottle," Chloe added quietly. "Gouging the eye sends a clearer message." I stared at them. My plan to fix them had turned them into pint-sized Machiavellian strategists. Web novel comment. Plot derailment confirmed. Romance arc has officially left the station. These two are more ruthless than in the original timeline. "Stop the car!" I yelled. Before anyone could react, I scrambled out and ran toward the alley. I launched a flying kick, aiming for the lead bully. Unfortunately, my legs were short. My foot connected squarely on his kneecap. "Ow! What the—" "Stop! Get lost, you little pest!" he snarled, grabbing the front of my designer dress and lifting me off the ground. In the next instant, something dark and fast snaked through the air. A string of obsidian beads wrapped tightly around the bully's wrist. Crack! The sound was sickeningly familiar. The boy screamed and dropped me, clutching his now broken wrist. Julian stood there, his face a mask of glacial fury, his shadow falling over all of them. "You," he said, his voice a low whisper that was more terrifying than any shout. "You dared to touch my daughter?" The bully scrambled away, terrified. Lily Tran stared at us, her chest heaving. Her eyes darted to me, and her expression changed to one of confusion. "Hey, you look a lot like me." Before I could answer, Leo and Chloe were there, standing in front of me like a 2-person shield. "No, she doesn't," they said, in perfect, chilling unison. On the ride home, I felt a knot of anxiety in my stomach. "So," I began carefully, "what did you guys think of that girl Lily?" Leo scoffed. "Amateur. Can't even win a 3-on-1 fight." "Her defensive posture is full of holes. No comparison to Thea's instincts." Julian, who had been silent, suddenly lifted me from my seat and placed me on his lap. "Why are you so interested in an outsider?" he asked, narrowing his eyes. There was a strange edge to his voice, something that sounded almost like jealousy. "If you have this much spare time, perhaps we should begin studying Sun Tzu's The Art of War tonight. No birthday cake until you can recite the first 5 principles." "That's not— I wasn't—" I sputtered, my grand plans for a 7-layered chocolate cake flashing before my eyes. The original plot was officially dead and buried. The heroes who were meant to be saved by the female lead no longer needed her. But as I looked out the rear window, I could still see Lily's small, lonely figure standing at the mouth of the alley.
She hadn't done anything wrong. She was just a child, same as me.
And I couldn't just leave her to the wolves. I didn't waste any time. The next day, I approached two of Julian's most imposing security guards. "I need you to find someone," I told them, my voice filled with a practiced 7-year-old authority that Julian himself had unintentionally taught me. I gave them Lily Tran's name. Armed with my foreknowledge of the novel, I told them to look for a rundown apartment building in the Bronx, for a father with a gambling problem and a history of debt. It took them less than 3 hours to confirm everything. That afternoon, I had them drive me there. We arrived to the sound of shouting. Through the thin door of Lily's apartment, we could hear a man's drunken slurring. $5,000 and she's yours. She's a good looker, looks just like her mother. You'll get your money's worth." I signaled for the guards to open the door. Inside, a reedy man with bloodshot eyes was holding a phone, his other hand tangled in Lily's hair as he tried to drag her toward the door. Lily, despite the tears in her eyes, was kicking and biting, her spirit refusing to break. She froze when she saw us. Me, a small girl in a pristine dress, flanked by two men who looked like they could punch through walls. The man, her father, stared, his jaw slack. I stepped forward, my voice as cold as I could make it. "I'll buy her." Web novel comment. OMG. Thea dropping the ice-cold CEO line. Julian taught her well. Web novel comment. This is insane. A 7-year-old is about to buy the original female lead. Her father's eyes, clouded with greed, lit up. "You? Well, a fine young lady like you, she's my own flesh and blood. It'll cost you $20,000. I gave a small, cold laugh. "You're not in a position to negotiate." "Says who?" he sneered. "Says us," a cool voice said from behind me. I turned to see Leo and Chloe stepping out from behind the guards. They must have followed me. Leo held up a tablet, displaying a grainy video. "This is you, last Tuesday, at an illegal poker game in Queens, using a marked deck. I wonder what the club's owner would pay for this information." Chloe then held up a different phone. It showed a photo of her father loading a prize-winning bulldog into the back of a van last week. And this is the prize dog that went missing from that same club owner. I believe there is a rather substantial reward for information leading to its return. The man's face went from white to green. Web novel comment. The villain duo strikes. They are a genius crime-fighting or crime-committing team. In the end, we didn't give him $20,000. Leo tossed a single quarter at his feet. "The price of a beggar," he said with disdain. "Now get out." The man scrambled for the coin and fled without a backward glance. Lily was huddled in a corner, shaking. I walked over and knelt in front of her. "It's okay now," I said softly. "You're free." Later, in a quiet cafe, I presented her with a folder. It wasn't cash, it was a trust, set up to fund her education and living expenses. A sponsorship. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She whispered, "Why? Why are you helping me?" I thought for a moment, remembering Julian's cold fury when he saw my scar. "Because you look like me," I said honestly. "And my father taught me that all girls in this world deserve to be protected. And sometimes you have to learn to be the one who does the protecting." I didn't just give her a safety net. I gave her armor.
I enrolled her in Taekwondo, in Muay Thai, and self-defense classes. Her father still came around sometimes looking for money, but each time he was met with a stronger, more confident Lily who could send him packing without any help. Leo and Chloe's disdain for her slowly morphed into a grudging respect. She wasn't weak. She was a fighter. A year later, Lily's father, Toldai High, lost big. He owed the kind of people who take more than just money. Desperate, he hired a pair of thugs to kidnap his own daughter, planning to sell her to a black market syndicate. If they couldn't sell her whole, they'd sell her in pieces. But they made one critical mistake. They were given a description. A small, dark-haired, 8-year-old girl who looked like Lily Tran and frequented the area. They snatched me instead. I woke up to darkness and the smell of rust. My wrists were bound with a coarse rope that bit into my skin, and the cold metal bars of a cage pressed against my back. The swaying motion of a vehicle made the cage rattle ominously. I wasn't scared. I was furious. I calmly began working on the ropes with a small, sharpened blade hidden inside the bracelet Chloe had given me for my last birthday. A wolf repellent, she'd called it.
The van suddenly screeched to a halt, throwing me against the bars. There was a slit in the tarp covering the cage. I saw it. Bathed in the van's headlights, a lone figure straddled a powerful motorcycle, blocking the road. She was spinning a metal baseball bat with effortless grace. Bam! She swung the bat, leaving a massive dent in the vehicle's hood. What is happening? Is that Lily? Since when was she a superhero? Let her go. Lily Tran's voice rang out, cold and laced with fury. A thug jumped out of the driver's side, cursing. You little brat, you're dead. He never finished the sentence. A single swift swing of the bat sent him flying. I watched, wide-eyed, as Lily kicked open the back doors of the van and leveled the bat at the remaining thug's throat. I said, she repeated, her voice deadly calm, let her go. She didn't need a prince. She became the knight in shining armor herself. The moment the cage was open, the air was filled with the deafening thwump, thwump, thwump of helicopter blades. Lily pulled me out, threw me onto the back of her motorcycle, and yelled, "Hold on!" The bike roared to life. High above us, my father's voice boomed through a loudspeaker, a sound of pure divine wrath that echoed across the city. You touched my daughter. I will erase you all. In the motorcycle's rearview mirror, I could see one of the Croft Industries military-grade helicopters unleashing a hail of gunfire, turning the kidnapper's van into a raging inferno that lit up the night sky. The moment Lily's motorcycle skidded to a halt in the grand driveway of the Croft estate, we were swarmed. But it wasn't by enemies. It was by family. Leo was there, his young face grim and set. He had already, through his own terrifying network of information, tracked down and captured Tode High. The pathetic man was bound to a chair in the middle of the courtyard. Chloe stood beside him, her expression eerily calm, as she slowly wiped a pair of heavy-duty pliers with a cloth. She hadn't used them yet, but the intent hung in the air, more chilling than any scream. The second they saw me, safe and unharmed, the terrifying masks of cold fury shattered. "Thea!" they cried in unison. The pliers clattered to the ground. They rushed forward, throwing their arms around me, their bodies trembling with the mixture of rage and overwhelming relief. "You're okay. We were so scared," Chloe sobbed into my shoulder, her composure completely gone. Even in the chaos, Lily remembered her mission. She shyly pushed a small, beautifully wrapped box into my hands. "Happy birthday, Thea." I opened it. Inside was a simple, elegant watch. She had used the money from her first part-time job to buy it. Seeing me just staring at it, she faltered, "Oh, you don't like it?" "I love it," I said, immediately fastening it to my wrist. Then I grinned and pulled a nearly identical box from my coat pocket. "This is for you." Lily stared as she opened her gift. Inside was a matching watch, only hers was a soft lavender to my pink. I held up my wrist next to hers.
"Friendship watches," I declared. "Hey, what about us?" Leo demanded, looking offended. I just laughed, pulling out 2 more boxes for him and Chloe. At that moment, Julian descended. He took in the scene. Me, safe, the siblings, protective, and Toadie high, tied to a chair. His gaze settled on the kidnapper, and the air turned to ice. "He's still breathing?" He issued a single final command to his head of security. "Ensure he never walks or works on this continent again. I hear the diamond mines in Sierra Leone are always hiring. Arrange a one-way flight." As the man was dragged away, screaming for a mercy he would never receive, my new, strange, terrifying family huddled together under the light of a brumming van in the distance. 4 years later, I stood at the entrance to NYU. Leo and Chloe insisted on carrying my luggage, nearly starting a tug of war over my heaviest suitcase. Before either could win, a blur of motion swept past them. "I got it," Lily said, effortlessly hoisting the suitcase onto her shoulder. Now a stunning and confident young woman, she strode ahead of us like a seasoned traveler. Unfortunately, she wasn't looking where she was going and bumped squarely into a handsome young man, sending his stack of books flying. "It's him, the original male lead, Ethan." "Oh, I'm so sorry," Ethan said, flashing a charming smile. "Let me help you with that." He reached for the suitcase. It was a classic meet-cute, and it was ruined in spectacular fashion. Lily, her reflexes honed by years of self-defense training, saw his advance as a threat. In one smooth motion, she grabbed his outstretched arm, shifted her weight, and sent him flying over her shoulder. He landed on the ground with a loud oof. "Try to steal my friend's luggage, will you?" she snarled, standing over him protectively. What?" Ethan groaned, looking up at her from the pavement, utterly bewildered, but also intrigued. Watching him get to his feet and immediately try to ask the girl who just body slammed him out for coffee, I finally understood. Some things, perhaps, were destiny. People were drawn to each other for reasons no one could explain. But their stories could be completely, utterly, and wonderfully rewritten.